All right, my name is Todd Eaton. I'm the QA manager for the Weather Company, an IBM business. Most people don't realize that Weather Channel, the digital side of the house, was bought by IBM last year. So we're IBM people now, so when you talk to the IBM guys, they all know us, and we're one big happy family now. Ryan Lavelle, yeah, right. Most of you know. Yeah, Ryan Lavelle, he's from Expansion. He's with our test automation team, and he's helped me out. He's going to help explain how we did this, because we got a pretty interesting story of what we did. But before we start, everybody realize this is live streamed, right? So this morning, like 5 a.m. Pacific time, I'm on my call with my team, and I said, yeah, we're going to do this talk. And they're like, hey, give us the live stream. So I gave it to them. So if you can do me a favor, turn around and look at the camera and say, hi, Weather. Hey, yeah. Yeah, there you go. Ifty, get back to work. Oh, he'll love that. He'll love that one. All right, so what we're going to talk about today is what happened with us at Weather is last year, about this same time, our management came back and said the consumer-facing products for the Weather Company, which include a couple of different groups, they wanted to be on the same stack, the same technology stack, and our world was changing. Our world was actually changing dramatically. So they went back to the architecture group and they said, okay, what are our three main areas? Most people know weather.com, right? You've been on weather.com. You probably was on it before you came out here, right? Or something of the fact. Those that have jackets. Those without jackets, yeah, they probably never even bother to look. So we have three main properties: weather.com, wonderground.com. Anybody know of Wonderground? Anybody use that? Yeah, it's a good app and a good site. They're here locally in San Francisco over on Howard Street. And Intellicast. Anybody know Intellicast? You got to be a serious weather nerd if you know Intellicast. Great maps, the fantastic maps. They do a wonderful job. The main thing that was coming out of this was we need to be on the same technology stack. So they said, gave it to the architecture group, and the architecture group said, okay, we're going Node. I'm going to go Node.js. You can do Angular, or you can do React, or whatever you want to do, but we're going Node. So we're going to do Kubernetes, we're Dockerizing everything. That's how we're going to build this. So I was like, okay, cool. So development, they stood up a little React page for us, because that's where Weather was going. We had about 700 Selenium tests that were working beautiful. I mean, the 700 tests ran about 7,000 altogether when you think of the different location types, different weather patterns, things like that, that we have to test each day. So it was going real well, but we ran it against the React page, and what do you think happened? Broke. Yeah, everything broke. None of the tests would run. So I go back to Ryan and I say, hey, how long would it take us to fix all these tests to work in React? It took us about 3 years to write these. 2.5 years to write all 700 and get it bulletproof for where we were. He said, it'll probably take us a year. I said, oh, wonderful. On top of that, what was happening is our product group came back and said, Weather's world, weather.com's world changed dramatically within the last couple of years. I've been working with Weather for 5 years now. When I first started, we were probably 70% desktop, 30% mobile. Within that 5 years, we did a flip, and we're now at 60% mobile, reaching up 65% some months, and 40 or 35% desktop. Desktop, mostly during the day, people are at work, the unproductive hours. I saw Slack, and they have all those productive hours. Yes, weather.com, we're the unproductive hours, right? But we saw that flip, and our management said, look, you got to cover that. You cannot, you got to make sure that your testing will cover mobile on top of desktop and all the different stuff. So I went out and did some research, and each month I present to the product people what our stats are. And this is weather.com's browser activity on the desktop. It's Chrome, basically. Half our audience uses Chrome. How do you like IE? Oh my God, who's that IE guy? We're saying, oh, I worked on IE. Oh, I want to strangle him. No. Because IE 11 is 15% of our desktop users. I think it's the feds and your grandmothers. They gotta be those, right? Next group, sorry. There we go. Tablets. It's an iPad world. Over half is doing iPads. That kind of equates to weather.com people. I mean, they use the iPad, bring it up, see videos, things like that. It kind of makes sense. I was really surprised to see the Safari 9. Once again, your grandma using the iPad 2, because she never upgraded, is looking at weather.com. And Chrome Mobile, a couple of Samsung browsers, that kind of stuff out there. Oh, let's see. Oh, that was tablet. Tablet is 52%. The last one was actually mobile at 61%. So we had a trouble of, we're going to React, we're going to have to rebuild our tests, and we got to expand our testing across. Now it's more like, I don't know, 14, 13 different OS browser combinations. So everybody knows the answer for the second one, right? Because that's why we're here at SauceLabs. And that's when I started talking to SauceLabs to say, hey, I need to be able to test all this stuff in parallel across all this stuff. But what I was doing was, how am I going to get these tests over to React? The staff that we had was like 3 or 4 test automation people, and that they would write their Selenium tests, just like everything else that you've seen. Everybody, in all the presentations I've been in, they've been talking about, hey, they go into Selenium, they write their tests there. I don't think we could, when we were talking about it, I didn't think we could do that because we wouldn't have the throughput that we needed. So I talked to Ryan and said, how are we going to do this and actually get our tests up? And we both agreed that a test automation framework was the way that we're going to have to do it. So what we came up with is we use TestRail for our test management system. And we said we're going to have our QA analysts, not test engineers, not true engineers, but analysts, write keyword-driven tests in TestRail, use our framework, pulling out of it, go into Selenium WebDriver, pull those test steps down, push them out to either AWS or SauceLabs, get the results back up into TestRail, and then we can display the reports. Fantastic idea, right? So here's an example of one of those tests that we wrote. And in this, you'll see that we have a repo, object repository repo, just like everybody else, just like every other test automation tool. But the steps we have, in this one, we're checking the temperature, right? Current temp, we're going to check it against, against the current temp from the API call. We have a back-end system that has 2.7 million locations throughout the world where we have temperature, wind speed, humidity, precip, you name it. We got all the weather data. So we're going in here, we're pulling out the current temp off of the page, that object, storing it, making a call to the API call for that location that says, okay, give me the current temp, printing it out, matching them up. If it's good, we're good to go. So I said, there you go. We tried this one out, works beautifully. So then I said, this is the way we need to go. So there is a kind of an old, there we go. In our old framework, we are used to Jenkins. So in Jenkins, I went to Ryan, I said, we need to put in parameters within Jenkins that says, hey, I want to run a test case, a test suite, a plan, a run, whatever, whichever part in TestRail. And I'm not going to go too much into TestRail, but if you want to see it, it's actually a pretty slick tool. And be able to call it for different locales, America, Germany, UK, because we're all over the world. And then put in the browser and OS or device name that we want to pass off. So it will automatically tell them to do this. So there's this old joke for in the Navy. I'm actually retired Navy. I did 21 years. I'm a Navy chief, and we run the Navy. If you ask any Navy chief, they'll tell you the same thing. But in this joke, they talk about they're at the academy, and they go to the seniors, and the professor says, okay, this is your last test. What you got is you got a flagpole that you got to put up. In this flagpole, you got a chief and 4 junior sailors, and this flagpole's got to be 25 feet from the building, and it can't cover too much of the parking lot, and everybody's got to see it. And they give them all these parameters. They say, go give me how you're going to put this up. So all the academy guys, they're writing everything up. And they bring it back, and the professor says, okay, great answers. You guys know engineering. You know everything that you're doing. But there was only one correct answer out of all of it. And I'm going to read the correct answer. So what do you do to get the flagpole up? You say, Chief, put up the flagpole. So I went to Ryan, and I said, Ryan, make this work. So Ryan is going to explain to you how he made that work.
Yeah, so I'm going to go into how we configure our platforms on SauceLabs. And before we used SauceLabs, we maintained our own Selenium grid in AWS, but we only really supported Chrome. So once we moved to SauceLabs, we had obviously to support a lot more platforms in a way that integrated nicely with our framework. So anyone who's used SauceLabs is probably familiar with their online platform configuration tool. You know, you select your device, and it only gives you valid operating systems. And when you select your operating system, it only gives you browsers that work in Windows 10. And we wanted to do that same thing, only more integrated within our framework. So we came up with 2 options. The first one is to configure it in Jenkins. And the second one was to configure in TestRail, our test case management tool. And you might be wondering, why do we have 2 places to configure our tests? And it depends on what you're doing. If you're going to debug a test or create a new test, you will just use Jenkins because it's quicker, and it can only do one configuration. But if you want to run a full regression set on multiple configurations, and I'll show this, you'd use TestRail, so you could do them all a multi-configuration. So the first one I'll be showing is the Jenkins configuration and the implementation details on how we did that. So we had to use 2 Jenkins plugins. The first one is Active Choices, and that allows you to have like a dynamic parameter in Jenkins that can update dynamically. We use the Scriptler plugin, which is just a way to save a Groovy script in Jenkins. And we use the SauceLabs REST API. And in that screenshot on the left side, you'll see once you choose the operating system, the browser will update, and that's because of the Active Choices plugin. We go out to the REST API, and it will update the browser, just like the SauceLabs online tool. Only now it's embedded into our process. And if you're wondering what Windows 2012 R2 is, it's actually Windows 8.1, but due to licensing reasons, SauceLabs uses Server Edition. So we just have a little map there to remind everyone. And this is just to show how it updates. So if you, in the operating drop-down, if you click Mac 10.9, it will update your browsers. So they're always up to date because it's coming from the SauceLabs REST API. And you know, you can't have a typo or you can't mess up the browser version, which is lower down in the parameters. It'll only give you valid options. So to get more into that, if you go to Jenkins job configuration, you'll be presented with something like this. This is the parameter for our operating system dropdown. And you get 2 choices. You can either select a Groovy script and put it directly in there, but we chose to use Scriptler so we could save it and reuse that script later. So, so that's the script it runs every time the page loads, or it needs to redefine if you select a different operating system or a different browser. So what's in that script is actually only 8 lines. So as you see on line 3, that's where we're making a call to the SauceLabs REST API. And we're converting that into a JSON object, and then using some Groovy syntax, which I don't know if you're familiar with on line 8, What it's basically doing, it's grabbing all the OSs from the REST API, and we're sorting it, and we're just getting a unique operating system because they have over 1,000 total in their JSON. So we just want one of each operating system to display in the dropdown. So, and I ran it at the bottom there, and you can see the result as a list. It'll return one of each operating system, and that's what gets displayed into the dropdown. And this is just a snippet of the JSON from the SauceLabs REST API. So I'm only showing 2 here, but there's, like I said, there's over 1,000. So that's where the operating system key is coming from. And as you see here, they're both Mac 10.9. So that's where the Groovy script will make it unique and return just one. And this is just the final product. So using those 3 things, the Active Choices plugin, the Scriptler plugin, and the SauceLabs REST API, we're able to generate this dropdown that's always up to date with what SauceLabs supports. And this is just the slide I showed earlier, just hopefully give you a better idea of how it's all working. So once you select an operating system, it runs a Groovy script, which we'll call the SauceLabs REST API, and it will filter the browsers based on that operating system. So then just to kind of complete the idea of how do we actually get that into our framework, it's just standard system properties. So there's 2 examples for our OS property and our browser property. And we just pass those into our Maven script where we execute our tests in our Jenkins pipeline for Jenkins 2.0. And that's it for how we configured that in Jenkins. For the TestRail configuration, it's quite a bit different and it's not dynamic, but it allowed us to do multiple configurations in a single test plan, which is what TestRail calls just one or more suites. So a test plan can have one or more suites, and we wanted to have multiple configurations so we didn't have to run a new Jenkins job each time we wanted to run on Windows or run on Mac. So at the bottom you see there's one suite called keyword examples in this test plan. And you can edit that test plan and you select these configurations. So in this case, we just picked Chrome, Firefox, Mac 10.11, and Windows 10. And once you hit save, it's going to combine these into, so you get a Mac Chrome, Mac Firefox, Windows Chrome, and Windows Firefox. So here you see there was one suite, but now there's 4. And in parentheses, you can see the configurations. So now you might be wondering, well, how do we get those configurations back into our framework? And for that, we use the TestRail API. So it makes 2 calls. Here are just 2 snippets. The first one, get underscore configs, is it'll grab all the configurations. And we're going to need that to find how to match up the IDs for the given test suite. So on the right, you can see the first ID is 228, and we have logic in our framework that'll match it up with Chrome on the left side, as that's 228. And the thing with multiple configurations is we can no longer just use like a static variable to hold our platform configuration options, because we're running in parallel. So if we just have a static browser variable, it can't hold Firefox and Chrome at the same time. And since we're running at least 100 in parallel, that won't work. And there's a lot of ways we could have solved this, but the one we went with was using a new test annotation that we generate and put into our test. So here's a test method, and there's our test info annotation. So once we read it from the TestRail API, we insert it as a new annotation into our test at a method level. So now each of our methods have their own configurations. Now when we run in parallel, there's not going to be any race conditions or anything go wrong. They'll all have their own configuration options. And that's all I had on configuration.
All right. So then, looking at those, how Ryan set that up, So he's pulling the test cases, those test steps out, pushing them out to those different configs. And then the hardest part, I thought, was bring the results back into TestRail. And that's what this is. So you see in this particular one, I just took a sample Today Now card test. And we brought the results back in, so I've got 4 failures out of 16 tests. So I got a 75%. Now, granted, probably the SauceLabs people close your ears for this one, but I spent a couple of days looking at the SauceLabs reports and I went, I can do better, right? When you have to share something with management, that pie chart is actually a pretty nice pie chart. And it says how many passed, how many failed, yeah, we're ready for a release, let's get on with life. We deploy probably, well, we can do up to 4 times a day. We've got different containers that we do. So I'll have a local suite, I'll have a widget, I'll have a chatbot, I'll have a DNA, I'll have a Drupal. We can do all of those every day. So we do a couple of releases each day. And I got to have a report for each one of those that says, where are we at? And these are pretty nice reports. So I asked Ryan, bring back the results. And in those results, though, we're going to have to interrogate them. I remember the test about, or the presentation about the test that cried broke. Yeah, that's what all these are, right? These failures could be real failures or they could be just flaky tests, which everybody has been talking about. So what we did was within TestRail, we said, okay, here's my failure, one of the failures that I selected, and down there on the bottom, there's a couple of links. So my testers who are responsible for this test would go into this guy, select one of the links, and they would go right into SauceLabs. And when they go into SauceLabs, they can run the video and they can see exactly where this thing failed. And is it flaky? Is it a flaky system? Is it a flaky app? Is it a flaky test? What is it that's causing us the grief? Now, I got a couple of users that they're not big fans of going into TestRail. They rather just look at Jenkins itself. So I said, okay, Ryan, we need the same link, but only in Jenkins. So here we got this generated test suite, just a sample one that we ran. It's got a couple thousand tests in it. And in this one, we go and you got your typical Jenkins output. You see that we have screenshots in there, so we can actually look at the screenshots and see. And if those screenshots aren't valuable enough, then we have a SauceLabs link and we have a TestRail link. So they can go to TestRail and actually go see the test case and marry it up, or go into SauceLabs and actually look at the video and see where it failed. So where did this get us all going? Remember I told you we had 700 tests that we ran, and they were pretty good. I mean, every day we ran that test, and we would release every day, and we'd have about 7,000 runs. So 700 tests, you're running on multiple locales, usually Germany, Spain, a couple other ones, and multiple locations. So it would all be about 7,000 different runs, or different test runs, if you would. We, by having the QA analyst be able to write the tests in a keyword-driven framework, in that same period, in this last year, actually, we're now up to 3,076 from this morning that I saw. So we have, by far, stretched out the number of test cases that we do. This is why my management looks at me and says, yeah, you made the smart move on that one. And if you can go back and show people, yeah, we went from 700 tests to 3,000 tests, and we're testing on at least 5 different browser OS combinations every day, yeah, they're going to say, yeah, you're doing your job. And that's really what you want, is to make sure you say, yeah, I'm trying to cover everything I'm doing. And we have really gone, since the 5 years that I've been there, we have stretched the amount of testing that we have in our app tremendously. So just a couple of things at the end. We're now in the middle of this React rollout. So if you go to weather.com, and please do, I mean, my family likes to live in a house, so please go to weather.com, keep your ad blocker off, because that's how I get paid. But take a look, and you will see a difference. If you go to the local suite pages, those are our, today, hourly, 10-day, 5-day. Those are the big pages everybody uses. You'll see a look to it, and it is a pretty slick look. And they've got a spa that'll let you go real fast between it. It works real well on mobile devices. And then if you go to an article page or a video page, you'll see the kind of the older page that we had, and we're converting that over. So we're constantly moving over. In fact, right now we got an A/B test on our home page, and you might get like the old home page and the new home page, and they'll look dramatically different. But that's what these tests are doing, is we're going out there, we're deploying every day, and we're trying to improve that. Like the keynote speaker, every day we're continuously improving the way that we're doing it, trying to make it faster, trying to make it better for our fans, and having a better experience. The last thing I wanted to say, and I forgot, I was going to do this in the beginning, but I'll do it now, was how many true testers in the group? Raise up your hand. Okay, good bit. Testers have a little bit of OCD, right? Just a tiny bit? Yeah, just a tiny bit. Is anybody bugged that track 2 is on the left and track 1 is on the right? I don't know why. That just floors me every time. All right. So I did my job. We got a little bit of time left. I was between you and your lunch. So we have plenty of time to get for lunch. Thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it. Let's see. Yep, I think that's it. And if you got any questions or anything, feel free to grab Ryan and I, and we'll be more than happy to tell you more about our story and tell you how we did it. Thanks.